Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. Lots of times on the channel I'll say to be patient and wait 6 to 12 months after a movie or a show, and you'll probably get a better deal on a 9.8. And you know what? We are about 6 to 12 months out from the Let There Be Carnage movie. So actually I think right now it's a pretty great time to consider buying some of these big like symbiote key issues in the 9.8. And I think the pricing information is showing that. Certainly leading into the Let There Be Carnage movie, like the 6 to 12 months before the movie, was not the time to buy. The pricing's looking a lot better on a lot of these key issues in the 9.8. So first one, we'll start with an Amazing Spider-Man 316. Yeah, just the cool McFarlane Venom cover to have, for sure. If you're a big McFarlane and Venom fan, this is the coolest one going. Super classic, pretty great collector item in a 9.8, and price is cooling down in the current environment. It's certainly a better time to buy this one than leading in to Venom 2. 1,398 9.8s in a blue label. That's a lot. I got into the 9.8 hobby maybe 3 to 4 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago now, to be honest. There was about 700 of these in the 9.8 on the census at that time. Now there's almost double that pretty much. 20.9%. The 9.8 ratio. So of all graded copies sent to CGC in the blue label, universal label, 20.9% of them are 9.8. So the lower the better, the lower, like the tougher to get a 9.8 in. But that's pretty decent, but not amazing. We'll get into a couple other tougher 9.8s here. Recent prices. Saw one sell on Comic Link for $900. That one just ended about a week ago. Saw one sell for $925 and a $975. So maybe get really lucky on this one, you get a little under 900. In the direct edition 9.8 white pages, they were up to that 1,500 level. I think they even got over that for, a little bit of, just a moment there when the hot comic book market was very hot, and also leading in to the Let There Be Carnage movie. So such a better time to consider buying one. Maybe even get lucky and get it under 900 in a 9.8. I think that's just a great one if you're a McFarlane and Venom fan. Yeah, I have two in the 9.8 and just a great pride of ownership. Like those are ones I take out often and just check out, the awesome cover and the super high grade. It's a great feeling. Next one, Amazing Spider-Man 361, first full appearance of Carnage. Kind of on the record as saying this is probably my favorite 1990s cover of all time, and you get the first full appearance of Carnage in there. So you know what? On this one, I'm going to recommend the newsstand edition. There's so the newsstand rather than the direct edition. And there seems to be quite a big price difference emerging from the newsstands and the directs. Interesting. On the census, though, blue label 5,083 9.8s. So one of 5,000. So it kind of makes sense to go after that, the more rare version in the newsstand with a 1 of 5,000. This being an early 90s book in the early 90s. Comic books were as popular as they ever were, so they're just super heavily printed. Maybe not the best collector items in the 9.8, so it makes sense to kind of go after the more rare version, I think. 23.5%, the 9.8 ratio. So 361 in a newsstand. I got some direct prices too, because the direct editions are just ice cold right now, really cooling down. But a newsstand saw one sell for $761. And, like 2-3 months ago, they were around kind of 700 to 750. I think one went in the kind of 600s, and I thought at that time, like, hey, you got to think about buying these now. It seems like the newsstand version is kind of bouncing a little bit, which is nice to see. 761 saw price. Saw one sell for $1,000. I think a few on eBay went for right around $1,000 in a newsstand, 9.8. So direct editions, I saw one sell for $492 and $465. So before like the Carnage movie was even known, the 361 direct edition was, maybe a little bit under $400, kind of in the $350 to $400 range. So they're almost right back to that price in the direct edition. So you know what? I'd kind of heed that bit of a price discrepancy between the newsstand and the directs, and I'd go for the newsstand on an Amazing Spider-Man 361. But if your budget's, not as much, consider the directs. They're cooling down. 465 saw one sell. Like that would be that's a pretty decent buy, albeit really heavily printed, so maybe they're not the best collector item. But yeah, Amazing Spider-Man 361. First full appearance of Carnage is just one to want if you're a symbiote fan, and way better time to buy now than leading into the movies. Yeah, and I think the newsstands leading into the movie hit around $2,000 for a minute there. So, you know, now they're $761, maybe up to $1,000. So, way better time to buy. Amazing Spider-Man 2.98, the next one. Yeah, this is a first cameo appearance of Eddie Brock. It's also the first Todd McFarlane Spider-Man art. And yeah, Todd, he just did Spider-Man so cool during this time. He kind of brought Spider-Man pretty much into like the new modern age of comic books. Just a really cool way of drawing Spider-Man. So first time he drew Spider-Man, I think is very collectible. 819 9.8s in a blue label on this one. Still under 1,000. 11.3% the 9.8 ratio. So getting lower on this one. Only 11.3% of all graded copies are 9.8. So it's a pretty tough 9.8. So I bought this one, like it was one of the first 9.8s I'd purchased because 298, I had a 298 when I was like 7 growing up collecting comics. But I'd never had a 300, so 298 was kind of like the one I could afford and the one I had, so I definitely wanted to add this one when I first got into 9.8s. But what I didn't notice when I bought this one is that the colors are kind of a big deal on this. I got super lucky. I bought this just sort of thinking, yeah, it's a 9.8, I'm just going to get it. This was like 4 or 5 years ago, getting into the hobby. Has really nice colors. This kind of dark red around here, you could usually tell if it's not the best coloring on this one. That's sort of an orangey yellow is kind of the easiest way to tell. But just a quick detail on the 298 if you really want a nice one in a 9.8. Look out for those great colors. And like a direct edition I saw in 298 sell for $770. I think that's totally worth it, especially for a nice one with great colors. We saw a newsstand of this one, and I didn't look it up this morning, but I remember it was like, was it like $4,500 or $5,000, the newsstand 9.8 of this book? So clearly the newsstand is just ridiculously hard to find. But in the directs, right around 770 this is a pretty great symbiote one to consider with the first cameo of Eddie Brock on 298. Okay, and last one here, the obvious, kind of a no-brainer one. Great collector item in the 9.8. Amazing Spider-Man 300. First full appearance of Venom and Origin with the kind of, you know, the classic cover that's been homaged a gazillion times, which I think is one of the reasons to really like this book from a collector perspective. Looks great on the census too. First full appearance of Venom. 1,256 9.8s in the blue label. I think there's quite a few signature series of this one. 5.2% is the 9.8 ratio. So of all graded copies, only 5.2% of them are 9.8s. And this is a super heavily graded book, so you kind of expect that ratio to be pretty low, but that is kind of class leading. It's pretty much in the late 80s, pretty much the toughest like Marvel comic book in the 9.8, I'm pretty sure. So that's just another thing about Amazing Spider-Man 300. It's super popular, but it's really, like, given the popularity, it's really tough to get in the super high grade 9.8. So recently saw one sell on Comic Link for $5,000. And these were kind of, you know, 7,000, 7,500 leading up to the Let There Be Carnage movie. This one hasn't cooled down as much, and it's just because it's like the one to get. And I always thought this one was going to be the one to kind of hang in there a little bit. And it has hung in there a little bit better than all the other ones, I think. But I think right around $5,000 if you're serious about 9.8s. If you're a Venom fan, I think these books are kind of cooling down now. And yeah, they're making a lot of sense at sort of current prices. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to get this one to stand up, but it won't. We'll just leave it like this, I guess. Okay. So 4 key issue symbiote books to consider, and I think right now you want to consider like the big key issues. You know, they're all cooling off, so some of these secondary key issues that kind of got a big buck around the movie, I wouldn't really consider those right now because, you know, the big ones are cooling down, and now is kind of the time to buy when they're on the cool down. And certainly moving forward, there's probably going to be a black costume Spider-Man movie, and maybe Venom, you know, he hasn't showed up in the MCU. So, you know, I think there's still a lot of potential moving forward with symbiote key issues. Okay, we'll leave it at that though, team. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. If you're liking my content, please subscribe and hit that bell, and I'll keep you updated on future videos.